welcome to the Art of Being Human. As we continue to work with drugs and I talk about them, what I'd like to do today is to use some of the terms that I'll be using when I talk about the effects of drugs on the system, because what I'm trying to do and what I will be doing is I'll be talking about alcoholism and drug use and what the symptoms are, and I'll be using some of these terms, and some of these terms may or may not be familiar to you. So what I'm going to do now is get into the terms that I will be using when I discuss the effects of drugs on your system should you be taking it. And I get these from medical textbooks and just from the use of psychology, because I do a lot of counseling or have done a lot of counseling. I've taken people off drugs before. I know what to look for. And so these terms are very familiar to me, but they may not be familiar to you. So I want to go into these terms, and then you'll have an understanding of them when I actually do use them discussing the drugs. So here are some definitions. We'll be using these charts. One definition we'll start off with, it's called a weak ego. What is a weak ego? Well, if you are not strong psychologically and you can be manipulated into doing things that you prefer not to do, that you don't want to do, but somehow you feel you get kind of conned into it, that can be a sign of a weak ego. You know, you're not strong enough to say no and mean no. And that affects you in your personal relationships as well as in the drug taking. Because supposing somebody wanted to entice me into taking alcohol, I don't drink at all. I don't ever use alcohol. But supposing somebody wanted me to use alcohol and they tried to manipulate me into it. Well, it tastes good. Well, it'll do this for you. It'll do that for you. You feel good. You'll feel high. You'll feel empowered. Don't you want to try it? It won't hurt you. Just take a little bit. It won't hurt you. And I've been in situations like this, and I always say, no, I'm not going to drink. I don't drink. I'm not going to drink. I remember being a college professor in Tennessee, and myself and a friend went to see somebody that was a friend of somebody else. At any rate, we were at somebody else's house, and a man was there, and he kept trying to say, why don't you have a little bit of this? And it was some kind of wine or alcohol or something. And I says, no, I don't drink. Well, just try a little bit of it. It won't hurt you. It'll taste really good. Why don't you try it? And I was very polite. I said, no, I prefer not to. I really don't want to drink. Well, it's not going to hurt you. This is just this little bit. No, I prefer not to do it. I don't understand why you wouldn't try it. It'll make you feel good. What's wrong with that? No, I don't want to do it. You know, and on and on and on it went. It's like he wouldn't give up. But having a strong ego, every time he mentioned it, which was very frequently, I kept saying, no, I'm not going to. No, I'm not going to. No, I prefer not to. Now, the same thing or a similar thing happened to me when I was trying to buy a car. The salesman at the car agency wanted me to buy a big van, kind of like a station wagon type thing, an older one, a white one. I didn't like it. I wasn't going to buy it. Why don't you buy this? I don't want to buy this. Well, it will be wonderful when you get it. It'll run well. I know it. I don't want to buy it. And then he went on, we'll paint it. We can get it any color you want. I don't want to buy it. It's too big. I don't want a car that big. Well, what if we fix this up and we fix that up? Won't that be great? Yeah, but I don't want to buy it. And this went on and on and on for over a half an hour. And finally he said to me, oh, I get it. You don't want to buy this car. It took him over a half an hour to realize, after I said no repeatedly to everything that he suggested, that I wasn't going to buy that car. Now, what if I'd had a weak ego? I probably would have succumbed and said, oh, yeah, well, okay, if you want to paint it red, maybe I'll consider it, you know. And if I'd had a weak ego, he could have worn me down. Where do parents get in trouble when their children want to do something that they don't want them to do? They get worn down by the pleadings of the child. Why can't I? Why don't you love me? If you cared about me, you'd let me. All of this kind of stuff. If you have a weak ego, you can be manipulated into doing something that you don't think is right, that you don't want to do, because you can get worn down or manipulated into it. And if that happens, that's a sign that your ego is not as strong as it needs to be. You have to know how to say no and stick with it. So that's the weak ego. Emotional lability. These are quick changes in emotion. If I talk about a person being labeled, or they're emotionally labeled, or I talk about lability, it's the same thing. Quick changes of emotion. How does that happen? Well, I've had counseling sessions in which there's quick changes of emotion. A person will come in and they're smiling, I'm fine, and the next minute I know they're sobbing. And they're sobbing loudly, and they're screaming, and all of that. Then suddenly they change, and they're back to smiling, and they'll be all right. These quick changes of emotion go along with certain types of personality disorders. They go along with certain types of mental illness. But that's what we're talking about, and you do get it in drug use. Malaise, that's not a hard word. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with this word, but when you just don't feel good, you know, you're out of sorts, you're kind of grumpy, you just don't feel right, you're not happy at the moment, you wish you were better. It's just that general down, I don't feel good emotionally as well as physically, because this is definitely an emotional thing as well as a physical thing. Dysphoria. D-Y-S-P-H-O-R-I-A. We talk about people being dysphoric or having dysphoria. What that means is they're not feeling well, but I think it goes to the next level, a deeper level than the malaise does. They will be unhappy, they'll have an unpleasant mood, they may have depression, anxiety, they may be restless. So you have a lot of that in the dysphoria. It is actually quite unpleasant to go through that, I think deeper than malaise. Euphoria is the opposite, where you feel extremely good, you have good, you feel that you are in a state of well-being, and it's not realistic. You feel a lot higher, a lot better than what the situation calls for. You know, some people get more emotional than the situation calls for, but some people get so elated that it's unrealistic too. And for euphoria, you go up to that level where it's not realistic to the situation. You feel absolutely wonderful, absolutely on top of the world. Things couldn't be better. You get that with drug use. And of course, there are other things that will give you a sense of euphoria as well. Somnolence, it just means being sleepy, being drowsy. A lot of drugs that you take will make you very tired. And it's not, sometimes the drug's not intended to do that. It's a side effect of the drug. But somnolence means that you're very sleepy. Nystagmus, N-Y-S-T-A-G-M-U-S. This is a rapid, involuntary movement of the eyes. Sometimes there's dizziness involved with it, and the eyes oscillate. Now, when I say the eyes oscillate, have you ever seen a person where their pupils are going just like this? And I'm not kidding. You know, it's not just a little movement. They're oscillating back and forth like there was a motor behind them. You get that with drug use, and that's a serious situation because they can't stop it. They can't stop what their eyes are doing, and I think that it must affect their vision somehow because it's like they're not stable. The eyes, I can't gaze. If I had it, I don't, but if I had it, I couldn't gaze at a camera and keep it steady, which means my eyes would be darting around everywhere. You get that with drug abuse. So that's a very bad symptom. Tachycardia. Tachycardia you can get because of medical issues. It's not necessarily always drug use, but it's a very rapid heartbeat, and sometimes due to drug use, sometimes used for anxiety, and sometimes due to medical situations. But the heart is pumping way too fast. What's way too fast? Well, 100 beats a minute is way too fast for most people, especially when the average beat for the heart is usually around 75. That's considered to be very normal, 75, 68 to 75. If you're an athlete, then you're well trained as an athlete, the heart rate will go down, but it's normal for you as an athlete to have that. If you have a medical condition, it can go down. Now, when I finished with my heart surgery, my open heart surgery, I had a quadruple bypass, my heart did not know how to beat the right speed, and it was taking off like 90 beats a minute. And it was way too fast for an injured heart to try to get well. So my heart rate is changed by the medication I take. My heart rate is controlled by the medication. If it gets too slow, they cut back on the medication so it can beat faster. Or if it was beating too fast, they give me more of the medication. But my heart rate is controlled by the medication. In my case, a rapid heartbeat was due to the surgery that I had and the heart not being able to recoup its sense of what the right beats per minute are. But that's tachycardia. Grandiosity, a lot of people who take drugs have a type of grandiosity. They have an unrealistic feeling of greatness. There was a girl that I talked to that we had some asteroids coming by, some comets coming by. There was a year that we had Hyakutake and Halley's Comet, and there was another Hale-Bopp, those three. There were 3 comets that came through within a few months of each other, and that was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I don't remember exactly. It was a while back. Halley's comes every about 78 years, and somebody told me the reason that one comet came back was to honor her individually for her long marriage to her spouse. It had nothing to do with that. This is what it does. The comets come back in a cyclical basis every so often. So I knew that wasn't the case. Could everyone say, well, it's to honor me personally? That's kind of a grandiose kind of thing, to really believe that an act of nature was there just in order to honor a person as an individual. That's a type of grandiosity. There's a type of grandiose thought. But these people think that they're wonderful, they're great, there's nobody like them, and it can be due to a psychological condition, but you also can get it as a part of drug abuse, as an answer or as a symptom of drug abuse. Hypervigilance, when you are very, very alert to anything that can go wrong. So you're scanning your environment. You're looking around to see if anything is there that's going to hurt you. And you're watching for danger. You know, it's heightened alertness, but it's heightened alertness in order to be able to ascertain if there's any danger to you personally. So you get these people, they're always looking behind their backs. You know, I had a friend of mine, this isn't really a true example of it, but it just gives you an idea of the feeling tone. She wanted to use an ATM, and I brought her to a store where she was going to use the ATM. Before she would take her card out to use the ATM, she looked all around to see if anybody could possibly be watching her, because she was kind of afraid that somebody was going to steal her numbers and that she would be the victim of identity theft. And this is what she did routinely. And she had a lot of money, but she just wanted to be so careful that nobody was aware of anything that she was doing financially at a store, at an ATM machine. I don't pay any attention to that kind of thing, but that's a part of what they do. They're just scanning to see if there's any trouble. Now, if a person is taking drugs, they would be doing this, not just, you know, a little bit at a time, oh, let's look at this, let's look at that, somebody's going to hurt me, somebody's going to be there. But this is the way that they exist. This is the way that they live their lives, as long as they're on the drug that's causing it. So it's like a pattern of behavior, not a simple incident. In her case, she did it in certain situations to protect herself, but she didn't do it all the time. It wasn't like it was a pattern of behavior for her. But I just wanted to kind of give you an example of what it can be like, but expanded to the person's whole lifestyle. Psychomotor agitation. This is when a person is tense, they're restless, they're overactive, and it's like their bodies are moving, and what they'll do is they're constantly wringing their hands. If they're upset, they wring their hands, you know. It has to do with the anxiety that they feel. They pace back and forth. In other words, their body is reacting to the tension that they feel, and it's being shown in their behavior. They'll pace, they'll wring their hands, they'll rock back and forth. I saw a movie of a person who was caught, or thought he would be caught in some kind of a, this is a fiction story, it's not true, but they thought they would be caught doing something that was unethical in terms of the government, and they were so terrified, they sat and they rocked back and forth. And, but people who are agitated will do that kind of thing because they're always nervous about something. They're always anxious about something. And it comes out physically in their behavior. So they rock back and forth, they pace, they wring their hands. That's an agitation. If you were to see a person do that all the time, you would say that they were agitated. That's the way that you would describe them. So this is psychomotor agitation, where they're physically doing things to indicate how agitated they are. It can be a symptom of drug abuse. Diuresis is the increased need to urinate. Some people get that from drinking, or they get that from other drug use. They're constantly in the bathroom, but this is the word for it. Arrhythmia is an abnormal change in the heartbeat, and the beats are not regular. They can be too fast, they can be too slow. If it's tachycardia that they have, the beats will be too fast. But in an arrhythmia, it can be either way, too fast, too slow. The heartbeat is just not regular, and that can be very dangerous. So these are abnormal changes in the heartbeat. Then you have the hallucinations from the hallucinogens. Some drugs give hallucinations. LSD, PCP, DMT, STP. These are the abbreviations of the hallucinogenic drugs that people take. LSD is the one that we're most familiar with. It stands for lysergic acid diethylamide, and we get, as I've explained before, when a person takes LSD, it gets into the system, and it mimics some of the neurotransmitters in terms of their chemical structure. The chemical structure of LSD is very similar to the chemical structure of some of the neurotransmitters, and it causes the brain to react because it would think it was reacting to its own neurotransmitter, which isn't the case. It's reacting to something that's been put in the system that acts like a neurotransmitter, and as a result of that, what you get is a lot of hallucinations, or what we call hallucinogenic experiences, because it's not a true hallucination, but to most people, it's like the same thing. It's like the same thing because you just mimic what's going on. In your brain, you're getting a hallucination. You're seeing things that aren't there. You're hearing things that aren't there. And it can be bizarre. It can be very frightening. But so what you have to do is to help, if they can give medically something to help calm the person down so they don't have that so strongly. But I don't know that there's as much medication that will actually work for that. So these are the terms I want you to have. I'm not going to start something else now because we have so short a time left that we would just be starting it and then I'd have to stop. So I'm going to next time get into more things concerning drug abuse, a pattern that people go through to get addicted, and we'll be doing that next time. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.